The standards and practices person sent me a note that said you're only allowed to use the word ass 3 times, and you have it 4 times on these pages, and it says please pick your ass. And I'm like, you don't realize it, but you just gave me a piece of wall art for the rest of my life.
Hi, and welcome to Close Up with the Hollywood Reporter, comedy showrunner roundtable. I'm Lacey Rose, and I'm joined today by Chuck Lorre of the Kominsky Method, Bill Lawrence of Ted Lasso, Darren Starr of Emily in Paris and Younger, Wanda Sykes of the Upshaws, Nasim Pedrad of Chad, and Anna Konkle of Pen 15. Thank you all for being here. It's nice to see all your faces. I want to start with the question for all of you. There's an old adage that we've all heard, which goes, write what you know. What are the sort of most personal things, the things that you've mined from your own lives that you've put into these shows and these characters?
Well, I'll take it, but I'm going to answer for Pen 15. Is that weird?
Or done.
Please, thank you. So curious.
Yeah, by the way, I was about to. I got to start by saying all your shows, my kids and me are such sycophants. You guys are, but I have to say, by the way, my daughter said that I have to make a special moment out of saying that Pen 15 is her favorite show, even though it embarrasses me because my show is not her favorite show. So I'll start.
How old is she?
She's 40. No, she is a 20-year-old young woman.
Oh, wow. Well, thank you very much. Yeah, I'm such a fan of everybody here. So
there you go. I feel like that answered your question, Lacey.
Yeah, totally. No. We'll just move on to the next one.
Yeah. Every piece of trauma is definitely, I mean, not every piece, unfortunately, but a lot of trauma is definitely in Pen 15. A lot of parent arguing stuff. My parents loved that I put that in there. And yeah, masturbation, the normal stuff, every secret.
Look, Jason on Ted Lasso, every writer that came in, they had only seen the sketches and stuff that he had done. And I think everybody was surprised when we told them the show was actually about empathy, forgiveness, and mentorship. And everybody had to say who their mentor was that kind of got them, whether it was into Hollywood or told them they could actually do this type of stuff. And everybody had such interesting stories. They've all found their way into that show, whether it be with the assistant coach or some of the players or the young woman who ends up kind of changing her life and stuff. It's all it's what we do. We steal from the writers' lives and then don't give them credit for it. It's awesome.
Yeah, no, that sounds right. What about you, Chuck, Darren, Nasim?
Well, Kominsky is about your body going to shit, your mind going to shit, people dying, loved ones dying, and feeling estranged and alienated from the entire Western civilization. So it was pretty simple. It was write what you know. I would tell people that it's ostensibly about getting older, but the real operating principle was entropy.
Chuck, are you doing this interview from a hospital room, man?
I'm in a hotel room.
Okay.
I'm in a hotel. I'm actually hiding because apparently the people from Discovery want me to develop a show about mold and remodeling your kitchen. So
that's the next one from Experience, huh?
That's AOL first, now AT&T, and now Discovery. So I'm hiding. I'm in an undisclosed location.
I know for me it was pretty easy because it was, it's about a family, working class family, and trying to stretch a dollar. My parents were pretty cheap, so it was fun doing all those bits. Just add water to something, and you get a whole new gallon of shampoo or whatever. So so it was, like I said, it was just miss those type of shows where it's a working class African-American family, and that's what I know. So,
and for me, Younger was really about finding myself on the other side of the generation gap, suddenly the older guy in the room, and wanting to know what that millennial generation was all about, and reinvention. And Emily in Paris is really my fantasy of wanting to work and live in Paris where I am right now. So I'm sort of getting to like live out that show through Lily Collins.
Bad muse. What about you, Nasim?
I love writing about adolescence. Mine happened to be very awkward. And so I have, Chad is about a very awkward 14-year-old Persian boy trying to navigate his freshman year of high school. But I really just wanted to write something that felt honest to my experience growing up as an immigrant kid here in America. I think teenagers are already struggling to identify their identities. And as an immigrant kid, you're also caught between these two cultures, which can at times feel like just an extra obstacle to get through in your effort to fit in. So that's kind of where the inspiration for Chad came from.
So this is my first roundtable where I have two adult writer comedians who are sort of mining their adolescence for comedy, and they're also stars of these shows. As someone who'd like to get as far away from her middle school years as humanly possible, I can't help but wonder if mining these chapters of your sort of respective lives for material has proved therapeutic, even cathartic. And how often are you sort of revisiting things that had happened to you through an adult lens and frankly being sort of horrified?
I watch both of your shows like this, by the way. They're incredibly painful. It's very hard for me.
I do find it to be really cathartic to be able to revisit those horrifying moments, having now been now that I'm on the other side of it and have some distance from that time. Certainly getting to explore it through the lens of comedy is a lot more fun than having endured it at the time. But it is cathartic. It's for me, it's deeply personal. But I took aspects of my childhood and then kind of channeled it through this little pathological liar. He's a bit of an anti-hero. I wasn't as poorly behaved as he is, but he's a character who he can be quite selfish and impulsive, and he achieves his goals at all costs, which makes him, a little messy in that regard. But it's coming from such a desperate place that hopefully you can also empathize with him and just laugh at how ridiculous he is. But yeah.
You're so amazing in it. And I can't imagine playing on top of going back to 13, a boy. And that must be so interesting, just coming from your, it being like semi-autobiographical, but then putting it in this boy. I can't imagine. I think it's amazing.
Oh my God. I feel that way about you, the vulnerability you guys have. I'm hiding behind wigs and like a full exterior shell that isn't me.
There's lots to talk about the experience. It's very weird. I mean, there's a part of me that I'm like, okay, I'm very masochistic. Why am I doing this to myself? And then there's other times where it's really so refreshing to be naive and innocent and so optimistic, especially my character is like, everything's going to be amazing. And then it's not, obviously, because that's life. But yeah, I do feel like it's the kind of thing, especially the more traumatic bits that are, my word for word memories or our word for word memories of what happened, replaying them. I'm okay, but my dad passed away during filming, and all of a sudden right after, I'm doing scenes with my TV dad that I, as a showrunner was like, he must wear the same corduroys. He must wear this, it must be his car and da-da-da. And then all of a sudden I'm like, it's a ghost. Like, this is too weird. So I feel like in 10 years, I'm going to look back and be like, oh, that's why I'm so messed up. Or I'll be like, it's better. I'm better. I need less therapy.
TV shows as therapy. It's there's something to that. I should say I'm sorry for your loss.
No, it's okay. I know it's like a downer to throw out there, but it's an interesting tidbit in the.
It is an interesting, yes. Yeah. For all of you, when was the last time you guys were writing a scene that made you, or maybe it was your collaborators, sort of genuinely nervous?
I wasn't as nervous as everyone around me was, but we had an episode where Chad basically fetishizes Black culture, and it was like, can we get away with this? But he doesn't know any different. He just has the limited scope of understanding that he has. And I think I felt like it was okay because he fully gets called out for it. We don't just like let it lie in that. But it was such a fun day on set that we ended up having like just really interesting conversations about, you know, race and the way, you know, kids talk about race at school.
What is it? How do you know when people are nervous? I mean, are you getting the sort of network or studio calls that say, "Oh, we sure about this"? Like, what does it look like?
It's a little bit like, how far are you guys going to push this, like on the day? Because you know we open up takes and improvise as well. But for the most part, the network has been incredibly supportive, and we haven't, I don't think, done anything too insane.
The weird, the only fearful part of Ted Lasso, I think, was it's weird when you do a show with IP, and if anybody watches those old videos, they're very bombastic and sketchy, you know, and they're devised as improv promotional things to Jason invented this character. And so the weirdest thing, the most appealing thing at the same time was when Jason and I started talking about doing it as a show. He, you know, he knew too that he was like, I want it to be about empathy and forgiveness and about mental health issues. And the 7th episode, the only one I'm going to write, is going to be a real realistic and long portrayal of what it means to have a panic attack. Mm-hmm. And I just remember submitting that and knowing that, you know, I think all of us as writers have had the experience when, you know, the people that are paying the bills have completely different expectations of what your show is. And so that was kind of nerve wracking because I think we knew from the start that we were delivering something different than they initially expected. But it was kind of, you know, in an age that writers often crap on, you know, the powers that be in the executives, they kind of leaned into it and got it and went with it. So, but it was weird doing it, you know, because I also thought I was going to be doing a comedy, and, you know, we're ended up kind of dealing with trauma and panic and anxiety.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're always nervous every episode just because you wonder if it's going to work. But for me, like with Emily in Paris, it's like writing a character that's a bit of an ugly American. You wonder, are people going to get the joke? Not everybody did. And they don't somehow understand that you're joking, making fun of two cultures. So if you're presenting anybody in like a not 100% flattering light, people get upset. They don't realize that the character is sometimes not supposed to be perfect, and that they're, you know, that part of the sort of like the journey of the character is learning, and they don't want to, like, not everybody wants to go on that journey or accept the fact that somebody's starting from point A and then they're going to go to like point B, and that's part of the series, and you got to like hang in there for the ride. But, you know, that's also, you know, the risk you take doing anything. And I think that's also the serialized TV. It's like not everything is told in the first episode. A lot of people kind of like to watch one episode and make the snap judgment. Oh, I know what the show is. But, you know, I think the great thing about TV now is we're able to tell these stories over time, you know, and it's like, to me, 10 episodes of Emily in Paris or the first season of a series is like the first act of a movie. It's just like the beginning. And, you know, when you're thinking about a long game of going like 4 or 5 seasons, you know, your character is not going to be fully formed. They're not going to be the same every week, and they're not always going to be perfect and make everybody happy. So I kind of feel like that's the risk you take with characters that aren't likable.
Chuck, what about you?
Well, I think going into this final season of Kominsky, I was interested in dealing with how the loss of a loved one impacts Michael Douglas's character, how stoicism is kind of a response for men of that generation, to hold everything in place, to be distant from his feelings, and I also wanted to do something about reconciliation, and I didn't start out that way. You know, I wrote these episodes last spring, beginning of the whole quarantine last summer, and what came out was writing about reconciliation with an ex-spouse, like Kathleen Turner's character. How in your later years the anger and the bitterness, the crimes that were committed many years ago seem irrelevant 30, 40 years later. I also wanted, what also came out was you add money into a family and you can destroy the family. I've seen that in my life. I've seen, how someone passes away and the will rips the family apart. There were so many wonderful stories available to tell. And they all kind of spin around Michael's character coming to grips with being alone, 76 years old, and trying to make sense of his life. And it's not that far off from where I am now.
It's back to the beginning with the write what you know piece. You just sort of referenced, and the funeral scene is an amazing scene. But you have two shows that you had to deal with sort of coming to an end without one of your principal characters. What are those conversations like when, with the actors themselves? How do you decide, okay, I want to keep going and here's how I'm going to do it? What is that sort of navigation for you? I know I've heard you say in the past, a couple of years ago when Big Bang was ending, I think you said I would never do it. I can't remember exactly your phrasing, but I didn't want to do Archie's Place was I think something that you had said. But I'm curious, what is that? What are those conversations, and then what is the sort of navigation?
You're talking about Mom and Anna Faris. Anna informed us last summer, while we were well into writing the season, that she wasn't going to return. So the conversation on Zoom, because we were all afraid of each other, rightly so, was how do we proceed? And we, two words, I don't know, they're not words actually, Allison Janney. I mean, we were blessed to have Allison Janney as the co-star of the show, and this extraordinary ensemble around her. That ensemble was a reason to continue. The show morphed over several seasons into this show about this group of women who are helping each other recover from alcohol and drugs and just carrying each other through the day. I always likened it to people in a life raft, trying to get each other out of the ocean and getting through the day, and also having some quality of life along with maintaining their sobriety. And we had this fantastic ensemble surrounding Allison, and there really wasn't a lot of question. Is of course we're going to go forward. And
same on Kominsky, because you also have the conversation with an Alan Arkin. Again, it's that decision.
When Alan said I'm done, what happened was, and believe me, I tried to talk him out of it.
I thought you fired him. I wondered what happened.
No. He was 86, 87 years old, and we're in the middle of a pandemic. It was a very risky process to ask anybody to come to work last winter. But his loss, writing the loss of his character threw a spotlight on this man named Sandy Kominsky, and how does he grapple with it, or not? Does he defer his emotions because they're too strong to deal with? And that's the smallness of that story appeals to me. That's just about someone coming to grips or not coming to grips with how they feel when they've lost a loved one. And I've lived through that, and I've seen it happen to my loved ones in my family, and then the challenge is, of course, can this be funny? And when the grandchild of Alan Arkin's character is a Scientologist, sure, it can be funny.
Sure, we can find humor.
We can find that, and again, I'm like Bill. I'm a product of many years of working in front of a live studio audience. Wanda is always worked in front of an audience, and so laughter is critical. Whether it's in front of the audience or it's implied in a film presentation where there is no audience response. But finding a way to make this funny is the only reason I can call it a comedy. Otherwise, it's something else. It might be something wonderful, but it's not a comedy.
Sure.
In my ridiculously unhumble opinion.
Wanda, I actually, that pivots to a nice question for you, which is that you started filming this show where you did have a live studio audience, and you presumably were feeding off of that energy. Pandemic hits, you go back into production many months later, and I think it was a combination of a crew in that audience and a laugh track. How does that impact you as a performer and sort of ultimately the story that you're telling?
Well, we were very grateful that we did get to do 3 shows in front of a live audience, because we knew it was working. You know, the laughs were real. We were getting, you know, I was like, okay, we have a show here. So when we went back and did the last 5 episodes without an audience, it did give us confidence, you know, that because we knew that what we were doing was working.
It's a play with do-overs.
Yeah.
Anna and Nasim, you guys are both filming with actual kids, and presumably their actual parents are there with them. How much sort of explaining do you find yourself doing before a scene starts, and what do those conversations look like? And when have you chosen to, use a double or a stand-in or an adult? Anna, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I feel like every day I'm having some awkward conversation with, fortunately, we've been so lucky with the kids and the parents, and when we just have the time to sit down and talk about the intention of the scene and even how it's being shot. So explaining, the creative behind it, and that literally, I mean, there have been scenes that I wish were being filmed, like the setup of the scene where, in the first season, I have my first kiss, or my character has their first kiss right there. And it was, it was about my real first kiss. That was horrific. And with the actor, we've used body doubles when it came to the actual thing, but we we used a master of a wide shot and had Brady and I very far away, which worked for being 13, because 6 feet with some kid that you like is really hot.
Huh?
And we're just, using the 13-year-old awkwardness, I think, to help also as actors, us all feel really, really, really safe. And of course, the teens being the most important, that they feel safe. So we kind of, we come at it from a shot perspective. We'll talk about it. And then I think we took 2 steps, and we're 5 feet apart now. And it's, and that's it. And then we cut, and then we're in extreme close-ups on 2 mouths, and that was gross, and that I used my boyfriend for, which ruined things for a long time for us sexually. No, I'm just kidding. And then so it's a lot of that, and I think the more emotional things where you're going back to year 2000 and social dynamics that you hope are different now, those are more the trickier conversations where in the moment we're doing one scene with a kid that we're addressing, homophobia, or, the list goes on and on. But in that scene, there's just one little reference to it. And the character in that scene is just, saying something flippant. And then Maya and I will be in later scenes where we address the issue and we acknowledge the issue essentially, but that kid might not be back for that last scene. So we try to be cognizant of that and discuss, this is where the arc's going. This isn't a joke to us. This, and this is how it was in year 2000. We hope it's not like that now. And so that's, how we address things mostly.
Do you ever worry that a parent is just going to yank a kid?
I'm very nice to the parents. Let's just say that. Do you need a water, tea, anything? No?
Just like Darren cast, when you were doing these kinds, he was onto something by not casting actual high school kids in the 90210 era.
Yeah.
I didn't know it though at the time. I thought they were in high school.
Very hot high schoolers.
What about you, Nasim?
I found it so helpful for my performance to be surrounded by actual kids. They engage with me as Chad so earnestly that it really the performance, I mean, when you have a conceit at the center of a show like this with an adult playing a 14-year-old boy, you want everything around that to feel as honest and as grounded as possible. And I found that, I was just really lucky to get the kids that I did get. They really helped with that. And I did wonder going into it how dialed in they would be to the comedic sensibility of the show, because teenagers don't always know what's so funny about being a teenager. They're just sort of living, they're in that trauma present day. So, they don't have that distance and that perspective yet. So I did wonder if they would understand why certain moments are funny for the reasons that they're funny. And I was pretty surprised. Maybe it's because they're professional actors and they're maybe a little more mature than I was at their age. They definitely got it more than I expected, which was also wild because I'm like, you're still at that age. This is you today. But
I have a question.
They were able to.
I have a question of Nasim. I'm sorry. I'm fascinated because it's probably a bad metaphor, but the Muppets, I did a show with them once and they all stayed in character in between scenes and it made you kind of process. You started realizing you were talking to someone's hand. Do you two stay in character? When you're shooting scenes with the kids in between takes and so do you go in and out of grown up producer / back to your characters?
Maya and I kind of
go in and out, which is,
go ahead. Yeah.
I was just saying, I go in and out. So when the director yells cut, the conversations get real weird because in the Venn diagram of me and the kids, there's just our little TV show in the middle. They're talking about things I have no reference point of. And I'm spinning out about my landscape architect. We have very little to chit chat about, but they're pros.
Maya and I mean, even when we were making web series, we're just weird and can get a little methody with it. So I think sometimes people are like, are you talking to me as the showrunner? Are you, well, just kind of or people will be like, are you okay? And I'm like, oh, I'm just going over it, whatever. But yeah, it's very weird. And to be honest, I think there haven't been that many times where I've been on set dressed as an adult. I'm usually bound and wearing ill-fitting clothes and, et cetera. And I'm definitely treated differently. It's interesting, even with people I work with or whatever, those days and you're, at monitor and you have a note or something. And I feel half the time people are even though I love everybody very much, but people are like, oh, the 13-year-old has another note. Okay, I'll let her say something. And then, the days dressed as an adult, they're like, the executive producer, the showrunner has a note. So it's weird. It's so weird.
Darren, Wanda, Bill, Chuck, you guys worked on shows, many of them sort of juggernauts during the 90s and early aughts. What could you get away with then that you wouldn't be able to get away with now? And I suppose conversely, what can you do now that you definitely could not have done then?
I'll jump in. The weird question is and by the way, Wanda probably has a good answer for this too, just as a stand-up, you know what I mean?
Totally.
Too. But the weird question is, I've been asked that before of what could you get away with? And I don't think that's how people were thinking. For me, it was just what was more comedically acceptable, at the time, in terms of language and situations and the way friends talk. I don't think it was really weird because I think there's always a perception about writers sitting around in rooms going how can we push the envelope, and I don't think, at least in my experience, I don't think that's what was happening in network TV. I
think that's fair, but there are things where a legal department, an S&P department, an executive is going to sort of say, you know what, we're not going there.
Yeah, look, I'll tell you the weird things about how the world changes so quickly. Is on Scrubs, we did an episode in which Judy Reyes and Sarah Chalk were trying to get medical marijuana to relieve a chemotherapy patient their illness from, they were trying to get pot so they'd feel better. And shockingly, and this is not that long ago. I mean, Scrubs was like 15, 20 years ago or something. But we were told we can't do that story, even with doctors doing it for a cancer patient. And I was annoyed by it because I thought it was stupid. So I literally said, like, all right, how about their patient is a virgin and dying, and they want to get a prostitute of some kind to get that person laid. And they're like, yeah, sure, you can do that. And I was, which is what was on TV, which was, we shouldn't have put on TV, but we did it because I was annoyed and petulant and a kid. But to go from that, back then to now, I actually had a conversation with my daughter, who's 20, that I heard the words coming out of my mouth that I'm actually glad that you smoke pot more than, and don't seem to be that much into drinking. So it makes me feel safer as a father, right or wrong. And then I took a step back and I was like, geez, it's literally that rapid a change, the same way my kids don't believe that I grew up without a cell phone. They're like, how did you survive? So that was weird.
It's Sex and the City. It was sort of not, I mean, we had no boundaries basically. So the boundaries were only our own good or bad taste, but it was never about trying to really push boundaries as much as it was about just trying to be frank and honest and funny and have the humor come from a real, honest place for the characters. And, I feel like that's, still the criteria, no matter, what I do or what any of us does, I think, is that you want to make sure that the humor is coming from like a place that feels true. And I think that's, television now, it feels like, I think that like the envelope's been pushed in every direction, that it's like, there's so much I see that I feel like you don't want to do anything for shock value because there's really nothing left to do, so you just want to tell your stories in reality. And that's, for me, Sex and the City, that's just what it was all about. It was just trying to live in reality.
I think that makes sense. But presumably you, like Bill, look back on some of the sort of creative fights that you had and sort of can't believe.
On network TV, yeah. I mean, on network TV, we had a gay character on Melrose Place who, we couldn't have an on-screen kiss. We shot it, but then they cut it. And, there's so many battles.
It was important for you to actually shoot it.
It was important for me to shoot it and let the network cut it. Yeah.
I have so these young people understand, I think I told this story once before. When Spin City happened, you were allowed to say the word ass, I think 3 times in an episode of television, and they would have people that would police it. And I think I handed in a script of Spin City I kept this on my wall. It's a real thing. The person didn't know they were making a joke, but the standards and practices person sent me a note that said, you're only allowed to use the word ass 3 times, and you have it 4 times on these pages. And it says, please pick your ass. And I'm like, you don't realize it, but you just gave me a piece of wall art for the rest of my life. And
still hanging there?
Still in my office.
Love it.
It was also very exciting to see an ass crack.
Yeah.
What's interesting about even like hearing about Sex and the City is that for me, watching it was the truthfulness that was like prolific. That was the first time I was hearing stories, and especially on TV, about women going through those certain things. And I can't tell you how many conversations through watching it I had with my friends being like, that's a thing, or, I felt that way before, but I didn't know how to say that, or whatever. So it's interesting, reflecting the truth that's sometimes.
We just had so much material because those stories just hadn't been told in that way. On network television wasn't letting you tell those stories, and HBO didn't know really. They weren't at the time like so huge in the TV business, so they didn't really care. They were just like, okay, do that show, And
Darren, the young writers on the Ted Lasso staff are still referencing Sex and the City in scripts in ways that's not usually the shelf life of TV shows. It's really cool.
Well, I'll tell you what's really annoying is my writing staffs are always referencing Sex and the City and telling me, well, we can't do that. It was done on Sex and the City. I'm like, don't throw Sex and the City in my face. They do it all the time. As if I had nothing to do with them. Wait a second. They're calling me on it all the time. I'm like, I can repeat myself.
You're allowed to steal from yourself.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure. For sure. What about Wanda and Chuck? What are the things that you sort of can't believe that were in question when you were sort of early in your careers?
Well, first of all, Lacey, how dare you try to make me that old? 90s. I was a young stand-up comic in the 90s.
I said early aughts, to be clear. I said 90s and early aughts, and that was just for you, Wanda.
I thank you. Well, I started with the Chris Rock show, and I was on HBO, so it was do whatever you want to do. And now, I mean, I'm torn about that question because with stand-up, I know a lot of, comics are saying, oh, you get canceled, you can't say this, can't do that. But I'm with the mindset of if it's funny, you can do it, I think it's like when things are just flat out mean-spirited or racist, sexist, or whatever, which are all funny. But it's just how you execute it, I guess. I don't know. But I don't feel, like I can't do things.
It's interesting. Mean is probably, when you've been in enough writers' rooms, you realize mean is the first place most writers go. It's first base. It's the first place you go to for comedy, and you learn over time it's not necessary. You can go past it. If you dig a little deeper, there's ways to mind comedy without going to cruelty. About what you can get away with, I gotta agree with what Bill and Darren said. That was never the goal.
Sure, and I'm not suggesting that is the goal. It was more a question of what were the sort of things where you got pushback, and perhaps it surprised you at the time that perhaps you wouldn't get the same pushback for today.
My frame of reference for pushback was 2.5 Men, which was an endless battle because the show was purposely it was risque. That was the tone of the show. We discovered very early on that it was just a filthy fucking show. and that was what it was. That was the voice of the show. And our goal was to make the audience laugh. There wasn't a lot of deep cultural issues we were wrestling with. We wanted to be funny, and so the battles with CBS, which were endless, were us trying to defend what we thought was really good stuff, comedically funny. This is going to get a big, honest belly laugh, and I don't want to cut it. And I've actually discussed this on one of these other panels that we did get to a place where we would put in some horrific jokes in the scripts, knowing we would, all right, we'll take the bestiality joke out, but we want the 2 oral sex jokes, all right? And we were horse trading, just terrible material that was placed in the script so it would get flagged, so we could have a conversation, and so we could, okay, we'll cut that. Okay, fine, you win. And part of the process, oddly enough, with broadcast standards was the game of giving them a victory. There was, oh good, we've saved CBS, we've saved the nation, we've saved Western civilization. We took out a joke that would offend someone. And as we all know, there's no joke that won't offend someone.
I think that's probably fair.
Yeah.
Bill, I want to turn to Ted Lasso because it is resonating, I think, because of its tone, which doesn't have any of the sort of meanness that Chuck just referenced. I think you have said that nobody but Apple wanted to sort of initially buy this show. And now, flash forward, you ask, and we just did, every network or studio executive what they're looking for. And it's, my version of Ted Lasso. What were sort of people nervous about initially, and what do you think outside of the sort of acclaim are they looking to embrace now, or are they embracing now rather?
Shoot, that's a loaded question because it seems like everybody here has been through the experience of some show works and then everybody wants that show. That's just and if any of us on this panel knew what worked, we'd just do it all the time. I always consider myself lucky that my giant stinkers are buried in a heap somewhere and we're never on television. And I also want to say, as a comedy writer, Mean comedy sometimes works. You know, it's so weird because we're talking about whatever the ethos is right now. And one of my favorite shows of all time is Veep.
Mhm.
If you ask me to describe it, it's a show in which characters try to discover new ways to be horrible to each other, you know, and it's so mean. And the way the language and the way that they talk to each other, it's like music to me. It's awful. I think that one of the weird things about television is that you're trying to catch this zeitgeist of what people are looking for at the moment. And when I say catch it, I mean, I think everybody here knows that if you purposefully try to catch it, you're going to swing and miss, because that it just shit never works. And what happened was we did a show, and I mean this sincerely, that we were all talking in the writer's room about, there wasn't a pandemic or anything yet, but discourse had become so toxic. And especially for those of us that are on social media or that have kids dealing with what social media meant. So we designed that show to be therapeutic for, you know, we used to always want to call our production company Noble Failure Productions, because I feel like if you make a TV show that you can share to your friends and family without them mocking you for the next 2 years, you've won the battle, you know? And so we just set out to do something that was therapeutic to work on it. And the starting place was, hey, if you met someone like Ted Lasso right now in real life, me personally, I would go, let's wait for a week to see this asshole reveal who he really is. And then if a week later, that person turned out to be forgiving and empathetic and kind and sincere, then you have to look at yourself. Look, it's to be anything but grateful and act like we knew what we were doing is insane. I do think that there's a wave of escapism right now, that the world was such a shit show that whatever people are looking at, you know, whether it be the nostalgia of adolescence, do you know what I mean? Or a slice of life of someone's family, or somebody abroad, or two older dudes dealing with their very specific kind of relationship. I think what we really entered is into a place that people are looking to TV as escapism, the same way that they look to movies that, you know, in horrible times in American history. I know, look, I watch more TV shows and can sincerely say on a panel that I've seen every show on here, because that's how I was, you know, trying to escape, you know, over the last year and a half. And I'm grateful for everybody's shows. I could list the ones I've watched and list my favorite moments. So.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. Nasim and Anna, you both, these are both shows that had long gestation periods. You know, Nasim, in your case, it was developed elsewhere. And I think you heard sort of no's along the way. How were those sort of concerns explained or perhaps sort of not explained? And how did you ultimately sort of just block it all out and keep going and make the show that you guys wanted to make?
Yeah, no, I'm curious how long it took you to seem to make it. We started, I don't even know, I guess 8 years ago in a living room. And then we were able to make a short. We made a 15-minute short. And that's pretty different from what, it's a little broader, it's a little more sketchier, a little more sketch-like. And
Also sketchier.
well, I'm a writer. Yeah. And so we had this sample to show networks. I mean, I think most people were like, this is illegal, this isn't gonna work, literally. And then there were a lot of executives, to be completely honest, even at Hulu, that were like, I don't, you can do it barely, but I don't get it. And so that, you know, I clearly relate to being an underdog, and I don't do well with pressure, and I truly don't do well with when people have faith in me. And so it was okay. I mean, we had each other, we had us as co-creators and friends to say, I think this is important. We all had come out of a long period of, you know, what you guys are describing, actually, of like trying to be what people want and trying to, you know, catch what's in the zeitgeist, and we were kind of miserable. So I think, and as actors, you know, coming from just being actors, it's just such a people-pleasing position of being like me, do you like me? Do you like me? So it's really amazing to just own it and be like, people don't like this, but we love it. And if no one will make it, we'll figure out how to make it a movie. And this is fun. So that was the energy that we've had. And I think going into season 2, it was scarier because taking out the expectations was trickier, and it continues to be for me.
Nasim, what about you? This was a show that was developed was developed on a broadcast network.
Yeah, it started over 5 years ago now. I had a development deal, and in fairness to them, I think they probably expected me to write a show that was absolutely not this, but I ended up getting to write the first draft. And even at that point, I think they were hopeful that I would change my mind and want to play the mom, which I understand. I mean, it's a swing for sure, you know. So many years ago now, there was no reference point for something like this, you know, a half-hour comedy centered around an idea like this. So I totally understood their fear, but I really did just believe in it. And I felt like, you know, if we could get people to just be willing to suspend their disbelief and buy that I'm this character, once you get past that, it's very relatable. It's very accessible. It's a family show. You know, I didn't feel like it was insane, you know, to exist even on network TV. But it didn't get picked up, and I just stuck with it and patiently waited for them to give it back to me, and shopped it around, and, you know, it was in the hands of business affairs lawyers for a couple of years, and then finally ended up at a place that I feel like is such a great fit for the show, you know, in that more cable space. But you know, everyone says you just need one place to say yes. And so I was dead set on saying it through until I knew that it couldn't possibly exist, because also it's so, I feel like once I locked into the pathology of the character and understood it so well, like once you really understand what motivates a character, what they want, what they're willing to do or not do, and their effort to achieve their goals, the comedy comes so natural. Everything else becomes so much easier. And so to have felt inspired that way, I think is really rare. And for that alone, I was willing to see it through.
I was going to say, I think both of our shows started in the same place at the same, yeah.
Oh, really?
And then, yeah, and then they passed. Yeah.
Well,
oops.
That's an oops. Yes, Wanda?
Yeah, I just want to go back to the previous question about, you know, what you can and can't do. Yeah. Veep is also one of my favorite shows. So I'm not saying that Mean is not funny or not good. I'm just saying, as far as personally, the things that I would write, like I would never, that's just not what I would write, but I enjoy all those shows. And it also, as far as like what you can't do, it's pretty much what Nasim and Anna are saying, is that there's so many outlets now. You can find a place for that will let you do what you want to do. Like with our show, the Upshaws. Yeah, I couldn't do that show on a network TV, you know, on a network, but Netflix was perfect. On a network, they would make me have white neighbors. They would, you know, I mean, seriously, it was like, you need some white people in here. Come on. You mean everybody's going to be black? This is crazy. So I just think you can, there's so many places that you can, you know, you'll find some place that they'll let you do what you want to do.
No, I think that is true. What's something you wish you had known as when you sort of started out on these showrunner journeys that you know now? What are the sort of mistakes you made in those early days that you wish you sort of could go back and say, don't do that?
I made no mistakes.
None.
I'm joking. I made constant mistakes. The look, I'll refer to our three performer writers here too. Is you know, it's one of the things I've talked to Jason Sudeikis about, because he's, you know, this second year he's co-show running and he's writing, and even though it's great to have the answer key with you, you guys all know from the writer's room, the best thing about the writer's room, if you can go, does this line work? And the person sitting next to you can say it in character, and then you go, oh yeah, it works. He just did it. That's great. But the two lessons that I wish I had learned, one is I would assume everybody here that's also a performer, you don't have enough hours in the day, and you realize early on to be a control freak and not empower other people to do their gigs, it's almost suicidal, because there's no possible way. I can't do all the things, of caring the same amount about wardrobe, dialogue, directing, set decoration, and all that stuff. And I can't imagine being able to do that if you're also required to be a performer, throughout. It's insane. And the only people that do it, all those things, I think secretly don't like their actual lives. And so, it took me a while to get rid of that. And then the other one that I allow all the writers on my shows to say to me now is, there was this ethos when I was younger of every script has to pass through your computer, so it sounds the same. If you have a really good writing staff and you're giving and taking, sometimes that's true, but sometimes you find yourself doing what I like to call the lateral punch down, which is when you change stuff just for the sake of changing it. And now I've reached a point in my life now that I allow other writers to go, hey man, I think you took this scene home and just did a lateral punch down on it, because it's the exact same, only like longer and a little less funny. And so I think when you kind of take the ego out of it and that stuff, it frees up your life a little bit. So those are my two biggest lessons.
I think I wish I got used to the sense of panic earlier and just accepted it as part of the deal. Now it's like, where does that next script come from? It's like, it's just going to happen, and just made peace with it earlier instead of thinking that, it's going to go away if I get more experience. And then I realized, no, it just never goes away.
Nope.
It's the same every show.
What about you, Chuck?
Coming to having some peace with panic is a big one. We're doomed. We're screwed. We're never going to make this table script. It's constant, and it always somehow managed to work itself out. But the thing that came to mind for me was when bombarded with people telling me how to do my job, it took me 15 years to learn how to say, that's interesting. Let me think about that.
As opposed to?
Are you fucking out of your mind? Which was unnecessary. Looking back, I was so defensive. I was so frightened of these things failing. And that was really what generated the anger and the defensiveness, was fear of failure. I was afraid to fail. I was afraid this is going to all blow up. The show's going to get canceled. We're all going to go home, and it's just going to be horrible. And that fear drove a lot of anger, and it wasn't necessary. What the easier response would have been, and is now, that's an interesting thought. We'll take a look at that, and then walk away. just don't and sometimes it is a good note. Sometimes it is a good thought, or maybe the concern of what's not working. You can ignore the fix and just focus on the fact that there's an element there they're not getting, and ignore their solution, because the solutions can generally be somewhat dreadful. But yeah, I'd like to go back and be kinder. But to be kinder, I would have had to been less afraid, and fear and desperation are, the two horses that drive a lot of comedy. I mean, and going back to what, we're talking about Veep and stuff. I have to weigh in. Mean comedy is great. Love it. It took me a long time to understand there were other kinds of comedy. That's why I did Dharma and Greg. Dharma and Greg was an absolute experiment. After I was on Roseanne, I did Grace Under Fire, and worked with Sybil Shepherd. And without casting aspersion, I wanted to see if I could create a female character who is unconditionally loving, supportive, just generally in love with life, and see if that would work. It was almost an experiment to see if I could create the antithesis of the critical character, and she might as well have been from Mars. The character was there was just wonderful comedy in that she was approaching life from this other place. She would walk past a parking meter that had gone to red and put a quarter in it, and because the act of kindness, the random act of kindness, that kind of character was almost worth trying to see. Is there comedy down this road? And there was, and that's been the fun of hanging in there is finding out that there's different paths. I mean, people on this panel I'm in awe of, because you guys who knew these paths existed? I mean, I've been watching Pen 15 and Chad, and I haven't seen the Upshaws yet. Darren, I've been a fan for 1,000 years, and it's just it's wonderful to watch and go, oh, look what's available. Oh, that's wonderful. There's more opportunities than you could possibly imagine.
Are there experiments you guys have not tried yet? Are there paths that you'd like to explore as writers that you haven't yet? And what are they? Types of comedy that you haven't sort of tapped into?
Claymation.
Claymation's coming. Okay.
You just want to work with clay.
But you spent the last couple of years pouring all your sort of creative energy into Kominsky, though you, as I referenced earlier, have 27 other shows. What's going to get that attention now?
I think for me, I just like to do things that are challenging and where I can purposely get scared, because I'm out of my depth. I'm working in an arena where I'm not sure of myself, and that's the reason to keep going for me at this point in my life. Kominsky was entirely new for me to work in that arena, and to work with Oscar-winning actors who, the first time I directed the first episode of the series, and the first scene with Alan Arkin and Michael Douglas sitting and talking, and I was terrified. I was absolutely terrified, and I was grateful for it as well.
Sure. What about the rest of you? Are there things you sort of look out on, and things you want to try next that you haven't done comedically or perhaps dramatically? Yeah.
I'll answer only because I'm having this thought while I see these pieces. Look, one of the best things, there's some people on here that have been doing this for ages, you know what I mean? And I'm intentionally very Bangsy, so people don't know how old I am. I'm very, very old, right?
And so, Bangsy, I like Bangsy.
See, yeah, I know, right?
Yeah,
it's
that's
like
good.
Trying desperately hard to look like I'm not in my 50s.
Working, you're good.
Thanks everybody for saying, Bill, you don't look old. No one said it. But to me, I think one of the cool things once you've gotten through the system, and this is a great example of it, is realizing there's so many young, exciting voices with kind of ideas that not only are fresh and new, but that if you have any self-awareness, you could never come up with. And so, my favorite thing right now is if you can simultaneously help people like that get their ideas through the system, and work with them and get them to a point, that they get their voices and get a little credit for it. I'm joking, that part doesn't matter. That's what someone did for me. And it's really fun to be at that stage of my career where, you can still be working with people that when they walk into work are like, wow, a TV show, and it kind of takes away your own cynicism. And that's why I vibe so much on the mentorship aspect of this, because the one thing I think is a constant in television is I was shocked to find that almost everybody, there's plenty of horrible stories of high profile people in the arts, but the amount of stories of people that were also helped or mentored, or ushered in to the arts by somebody, whether it be a teacher or somebody in the business, is also awesome. And to have the opportunity to be nice to people on a panel and hope that you can someday exploit them and their talent. That's what I'm looking for in the later part of my career.
So call them, guys.
The only reason Big Bang lasted as long as it did was I got out of the way, and guys like Steve Malero and Steve Holland took over the show. I got out of the way, and it would have been over after 5-6 years. It ran 12 years because, like, because if you strangle these things and you hold on tight and try and micromanage them, you eventually start killing them.
I mean, that's a great thing about being in a room with other writers, is that you just get to kind of like get thrown together with a lot of people that you've never met before, and you don't know what's going to come out of that.
Yeah, no, I think that. Sorry, yes.
I was just gonna say, I'm like so still in my head about the advice, about showrunning. I just like cracked open all of my issues. It's been such an amazing learning experience and so creatively fulfilling, and a lot of pretending we knew how to do things when we didn't, and because we wanted it to really feel like our voice and our vision and have the opportunity to do that. Who knew if that would come around again? But on the way, yeah, so much panic, 15-hour days for 3 years, not be, just the list is endless, and micromanaging and not being great at delegating, not knowing how much to let go of, not and I'm learning every along the way of, especially in post, of being like, and there's 3 co-creators also. So then wrap your head around that, of being in post and, should we cut after the 3rd second or the 5.5 second, and, take that to the death. And then it comes out and you're like, oh, that's really good. And it didn't matter also. And learning just to trust everybody, and not that I trust myself, I don't, but talking things to death, I could move on from. And I think in terms of the future, just continuing to try to hold up the mirror to things that aren't talked about enough to me, because I'm finding that I expected a lot of things in Pen 15 for people to not relate to and be like, that's really the minutia of things, that was your life, that's not my life. And that's been the opposite, that the minutiae are the things that actually people are feeling seen in, and that's exciting. So we've been talking a lot about death today. That's definitely something that I feel like is funny also. I mean, it's devastating, and it's also so weird, and getting older as well. My mom was a nurse in elderly homes, and I would go with her. So that's kind of like a subject that I'm wanting to dig into.
I was just going to say, to touch on what Bill was talking about earlier too, I feel so lucky to get to make this show at all, because I don't think I would have been able to make it 10, 15 years ago. When I started out in my career, I had never seen a half-hour comedy centered around a Middle Eastern family. And in fact, a lot of the representation I did see around Middle Easterners was predominantly negative, and so it's actually why I started writing when I graduated from theater school. And so I was really excited to create a Middle Eastern character that was written from an empathetic place, someone who was funny and nuanced and even deeply flawed, but had flaws that were relatable. Now there's more than one, Middle Eastern family on TV, and there's Rami, and completely different show, one that explores faith in a very aspirational way. And it's just awesome to even diversity within communities. I feel like that's changed a lot in a positive way.
I do want to say too, to Anna and Nasim, just so you guys know, there is no judgment by showrunner advice. You're both 10 years away from when I even started to realize and learn that stuff. So enjoy the misery for another decade. You've earned it.
That's okay. I'm good. That's all right.
It feels like a good place to wrap. Thank you all for being here and sharing your time and your stories. It's really inspiring. So thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I'm seeing everybody.
Very cool company.